Welcome to the lecture 3. I told you in the last lecture about the concept of biosecurity and biosafety. We understood that biosafety guards us against unintentional biological threats. And to safeguard against intentional biological attacks, we need to employ biosecurity measures. Biosecurity refers to the strategies and measures implemented to protect against the spread and impact of harmful biological agents, particularly in agriculture, environment, and human health. It aims to prevent the introduction and dissemination of diseases, pests, and invasive species that can affect ecosystems, crop and livestock production, and public health. Biosecurity measures include border control to prevent the entry of foreign organisms, quarantine protocols, surveillance and monitoring of disease outbreaks, and emergency response plans. These practices are essential in safeguarding food security, public health, and economic stability by minimizing the risk of infectious diseases and biological threats to our flora and fauna. Alright, let us understand how a biological weapon could affect a single targeted individual and limits itself, or remains self-propagating, leading to an outbreak of disease in more than one individual. Then what's the difference between outbreak, epidemic, and a pandemic? I told you toxins are derived molecules. For example, botulinum toxin or ricin. Even though they are lethal in nanogram doses, they are not preferred weapons to be used as weapons of mass destruction. The resource and technology involved in mass producing and safely handling them limits their use to be used only for targeted assassinations. Live biological agents including bacteria, fungi, and viruses. These can be disseminated in a population to make a handful of people sick. Since people will become infective to others, the disease will spread in society following the channels of transport and migration. Air travel facilitates infectious diseases to spread over multiple countries over a small period of time. An endemic disease is a disease with its natural presence in an area over a period of time. For example, malaria is endemic to many parts of our country. And what's an outbreak? It's greater than anticipated increase in the number of cases of a disease in an endemic area. It can also be a single case in a new area. Understand it. For example, a single case of yellow fever, if detected in Delhi, will be termed as an outbreak because there are no cases of yellow fever historically in Delhi. A pandemic? It's an epidemic that spreads over multiple countries or continents. And epidemic is something that belongs to only a particular people or country. Although microbes are naturally occurring, they can be produced in the laboratory too, using appropriate culture, media, and conditions. The mass production of microbes was extensively used long before the advent of modern technology, and its use by various bioweapon programs of many nations after the First World War. For example, beer fermentation, setting the curd, yogurt or kefir, alcohol distilleries, pharmaceuticals, sour vegetables, cosmetics, bread manufacturing, etc. All these processes have used culturing and mass producing select microbes since ages. Although mass production of microbes looks simple process, its packing, storage, and release in a form that it remains stable on storage, efficient on production, and effective after release is not easy to achieve. Fine. Routes of entry. Once released, how bioagents enter our body? There are four routes of entry, four portals through which a bioagent or a pathogen can enter our body to cause a condition or a disease or death. They are inhalation, ingestion, absorption, and injection. So let us delve into what these are. Inhalation, a natural process of breathing, can become a route for exposure to harmful agents when they are suspended or dispersed in the air as plume or aerosol. These agents, when inhaled, they can have significant health impacts depending upon their not their virulence but also on their particle size. Particles that are between 1 to 10 microns, note this point, between 1 to 10 microns in size are particularly concerning as they can bypass the body's upper respiratory defenses and reach our alveoli in lungs, the tiny air sacs in lungs. The size range allows particles to effectively deposit in the lungs and enter the bloodstream, potentially causing severe health issues. Conversely, particles smaller than 1 micron are typically exhaled and thus pose no risk or very less risk as they do not remain in the respiratory system. And larger particles over 10 microns, they are generally trapped in the nasal passages and throat and don't reach our alveoli behind. Fine. The mechanism of inhalation poses a significant risk in the context of biological attacks. A notable example is the 2001 anthrax attacks in the United States, where anthrax spores fitting within the critical size range for inhalation were deliberately sent between 1 to 10 microns through the mail to US senators. This method of dispersal led to the inhalation of these spores, resulting in infection and tragically the death of 5 individuals who handled and opened these letters to inspect. This incident highlights the potential for airborne biological agents to be used in targeted attacks, underscoring the importance of biosecurity measures to detect and mitigate such threats. Now, contaminating food or water supplies with biowarfare agents or their toxins. It's a favored method for bioterrorists, primarily due to its relative simplicity and low technical requirements. Agents like botulinum toxin, hepatitis A virus, salmonella, and leptospira are particularly suited for this purpose. These agents can easily be introduced into food or water systems, posing a significant public health risk. The ingestion of contaminated food or water leads to the spread of these harmful agents, potentially causing widespread illness and even fatalities. This method of bioterrorism underscores the need for vigilant food and water safety measures to prevent and quickly respond to these threats. Now, absorption through intact skin, while a common route for chemical agents, is generally ineffective for biological agents due to skin's natural barrier properties. Microbes and their toxins typically find it challenging to penetrate this defense. However, An exception exists with trichothin mycotoxins, also known as yellow rain, the fungal mycotoxin they are. These potent toxins can indeed be absorbed through unbroken skin, posing a unique threat as they bypass the usual protective mechanisms of the body, making them a concerning exception in the realm of biological agents. Injecting biological agents through skin punctures is a method that can be achieved by employing their natural vectors, such as mosquitoes, ticks, mites, or fleas. This approach leverages the inherent ability of these vectors to transmit diseases. For instance, malaria can be spread using Anopheles mosquitoes infected with malarial parasite. Similarly, ticks, mites, or fleas infected with various pathogens can be utilized as biological weapons. A historical example of this method is the use of plague-infested fleas by the Japanese during 1940s. These fleas were delivered in clay bomblets, resulting in widespread plague outbreaks. This tactic led to the tragic deaths of thousands of people, demonstrating the potential lethality and effectiveness of using natural vectors in biological warfare. Such strategies highlight the insidious nature of biological weapons and importance of biosecurity measures to counter these threats. Okay, so what are the three stages of diagnosis of a disease or a disease caused naturally or caused by a bioagent? A definite diagnosis of diseases caused by bioagents or their toxins is crucial for clinicians to take timely and appropriate action and to avoid the inefficiencies and panic associated with responding to false alarms. For instance, indiscriminately testing every individual with fever or respiratory symptoms for COVID 19 could overwhelm diagnostic system with a high volume of negative results while also causing unnecessary social or societal panic. It's essential for medical teams to be well informed about the symptoms, signs, and syndromes associated with modern bioagents as well as their lethality. Additionally, understanding the intent and capabilities of various international states and non-state actors to produce and weaponize these agents is vital. Familiarity with specific terminology related to bioagents helps in optimizing resources and implementing effective countermeasures, ensuring a more targeted and efficient response to potential biological threats. So, a suspected case refers to an individual who exhibits symptoms consistent with the clinical description of a disease as outlined in the case definition. This person may have a history of contact, may have, with a confirmed case of the disease. Such cases warrant further investigation and testing to confirm the presence of the disease, as their symptoms align with the expected clinical presentation and potential exposure history, raising the likelihood of infection. And when a suspected case tests positive in a mass screening test, it's called as a probable case. Screening tests are designed for quick and cost-effective mass application with high sensitivity but very low specificity. This means they can often yield a significant number of false positives. Therefore, it is crucial to reserve screening tests for situations with only very strong clinical suspicion, as indiscriminate testing can lead to unnecessary alarm and resource misallocation. A probable case, if confirmed by a definitive or a confirmatory gold standard laboratory test, will be a confirmed case. For example, a spot test or a strip test for COVID 19. If shows positive means the person is a probable case of COVID 19 as on date. An RT-PCR is considered as confirmatory test for COVID-19. So if an RT-PCR test shows negative, we consider that the person is a false positive case. A word of caution here. As a thumb rule, we use various culture techniques on an appropriate sample taken from a probable case to confirm the presence of a suspected agent. A positive culture is the actual definitive diagnosis. Biological weapons, unlike conventional arms, are often not intended for direct mass casualties, but rather to incite panic and disrupt the social framework of an adversary. The mere presence of a few cases of an unknown or particularly deadly disease can trigger widespread panic, overwhelming healthcare facilities and communication networks. This fear and uncertainty can lead to significant disruption in the supply chain of essential goods like food and consumables, causing societal distress. The panic caused by biological threat can force many industries to shut down as people avoid public spaces and gatherings to reduce the risk of infection. The spread of rumor and misinformation can exacerbate the situation, leading to a further chaos and confusion. The financial implications of such scenarios are enormous, with the cost of lost productivity and emergency response measures adding up exponentially very quickly. Moreover, biological weapons have an economic advantage over other types of weapons. They are relatively inexpensive to produce as compared to chemical, nuclear, or even conventional explosives. A United Nations report in 1969 highlighted this cost disparity, estimating the operational cost against civilian population at just $1 per square kilometer for biological weapons. In contrast, the cost was significantly higher for other weapons. For example, $600 per square kilometer for chemical weapons, $800 for nuclear weapon, and $2,000 for conventional explosives. This cost effectiveness, combined with their potential to widespread psychological impact and societal disruption, makes biological weapons a particularly insidious threat in modern warfare and terrorism. Now, these biological agents are classified into three categories of category A, category B, category C. This depends not only upon the characteristic of the agent, what type of an agent it is, but also the type of response required from the mitigating agencies. Category A agents are recognized as the most lethal in the realm of biological threats. Their high lethality, coupled with the ease of transmission, enables them to spread rapidly and cause widespread panic. This combination necessitates specialized public health preparedness and response actions to effectively manage and mitigate their impact. On the other hand, category C agents, though less immediately threatening, represent emerging pathogens with significant potential to cause disruption and public health crises. Examples include SARS-CoV-1 and SARS, CoV2, which has demonstrated their capacity to cause global pandemics. In contrast, diseases like smallpox and anthrax, known for their high mortality rate and potential for widespread dissemination, are classified as category A agents. This classification underscores the need for heightened vigilance, rapid response capabilities, and robust public health strategies to address the unique challenges posed by these highly dangerous pathogens. Now, the response system. There are four distinct stages of response against these biological agents: recognize, avoid, isolate, and notified. Acronym is RAIN. It's a set of strategies designed to prevent the spread of infectious diseases, including those that may be used in biowarfare. These strategies are based on the principle of disease containment, which aims to limit the transmission of an infectious agent from one person to another. So, stage of recognition, stage to recognize. The goal is to get first responder as first receivers, to rapidly interpret and mentally process a suspicious event for what it is. In most of the cases of biological attack, only a very small quantity of the hazardous material is used. Furthermore, there is an incubation period for any disease to show its signs and symptoms. In addition, most of these diseases start with non-specific flu-like disease, easily confused with seasonal flu. Weapons releasing biological agents don't operate by a blast. An abundant atypical spray can in the vicinity of people getting symptom of a disease should raise the suspicion. In addition, there could be discovery of biosafety cabinets, cultures, and other laboratory inventory items in a structure in the area, pointing to an unauthorized production of biological agents. Sampling of environment, suspicious material, and individuals require special precautions. Never take bad samples to a good test. The responders have to be trained to take samples. In many cases, a two-step sampling procedure is performed. First step procedure is bulk scooping of the suspicious material from the site, packing it, and transporting it to the lab for evaluation. In the second step, the swab sampling of the residual material is done on its biological screening using field tools. Personal protection takes priority in the step of avoidance. Avoidance of exposure is just like primary prevention of a disease, most effective and lowest cost. All personnel, either responders or general public, should follow guidelines to avoid exposure and get contaminated. The trickiest is to prevent airborne exposure, which could require a full PPE gear with full face mask, gloves, and overboots. In the event of an aerosolized unknown biological material being released, a fully encapsulated PPE with self-contained breathing apparatus will be required for anyone entering the infected zone. Unlike radiological events, biological PPE are 100% effective to prevent contamination if used. Now, isolation strategy. Assuming that the scene of original release or accident is known, the hazard area must be secured. Taking the consideration of environmental factors including rainwater drainage, topography, wind direction, or the direction of the movement of unsuspected and potentially infected individuals, cattle, or wild animals. The hazard zone is typically divided into hot, warm, and cold zones. Typical decontamination happens in the warm zone, and safe cold zone is used for transport, communication team, inventory receiving station, press, and administrative team to prevent undesired entry. This is the responsibility of incident commander to establish and secure such zones. The responders should acknowledge that it is a crime scene. We not only have to protect the crime scene but also preserve the evidence, which could be empty shells, cans, or suspicious looking powder, etc. As a thumb rule, the responders should protect or salvage anything suspicious, and they should keep such suspicious material untouched for expert team to sample and analyze. Also, the least possible number of personnel should be allowed in hot and warm zone. Under no circumstances unauthorized persons be allowed to enter either warm zone or hot zone. Now, notification channels. This involves informing public health authorities and other relevant organizations about the presence of an infectious disease in a community. This allows for the implementation of appropriate containment and control measures to prevent the further spread of the disease. The authorities will assign technical team and allocate required resources to combat, mitigate, and investigate the outbreak. The effectiveness of this RAIN strategy in preventing the spread of infectious diseases, including those that may be used in biowarfare, depends on the specific characteristics of the infectious agent and the population it is affecting. However, these strategies can play a critical role in containing the spread of infectious diseases and mitigating their impact on public health. Now, the role of incident commander. The incident commander's primary responsibilities include establishing command and control. The incident commander is responsible for establishing a command structure and communication system to ensure that response efforts are coordinated as well as effective. Then, assessing the situation. The incident commander must assess the situation to determine the scope of the attack and the resources that will be needed to respond. Then, developing a response plan. Based on the assessment of the situation, the incident commander must develop a response plan that outlines the steps that will be taken to contain and mitigate the impact of the attack. And coordinating the response. Again, the incident commander is responsible for coordinating the efforts of all response agencies and ensuring that the response plan is implemented effectively. Communicating with the public. Incident commander must provide timely and accurate information to the public and the media about the attack and response efforts. Now, a concept of agro-terrorism, where a terrorist, a bioterrorist, tries to remove the food from your life. So, Agriculture and food systems, they are also vulnerable to, diseases, pests, or poisonous agents that occur naturally or accidentally introduced or are intentionally delivered through an act of terrorism. People are dependent upon natural jungles, for example, for fruits, herbs, meat of wild game, preservation of natural geographic boundaries, etc. Similarly, domestic animals are important and significant sources of dairy products, meat, manure, leather, etc. Agroterrorism not only comprise of destruction of or unfavorable effect on organized agriculture to disrupt the availability of food to gain a tactical advantage over enemy, but also includes damaging natural flora and fauna and domesticated animals, which of course are an integral part of the food chain of a society. Also, if there is an outbreak or disease in agriculture or animal produce, the exports of the food items from that area are usually banned or restricted by others. This leads to an exponential and fulminant economic loss and disruption in wider areas. On one side, where the perishable food items will get overstocked and spoiled at the point of their production. There will be a scarcity of food at the areas dependent upon that supply from producing zones. This leads to a secondary disaster in remote but trade connected areas. Now, uh, something like culling. In addition, response to arrest a potential epidemic includes extreme measures like culling of potentially infected animals despite the feeling that a significant proportion of these animals could be safe. Following study on economic losses due to avian influenza outbreaks in Kuttanad region of Kerala, India, during 2014 highlights projected economic horrors of a potential bio attack. The estimated loss from like culling live birds, eggs and feed destruction per duck farm was up to 12,000 US dollar per farm. The government invested somewhere more than 700,000 US dollars to contain the disease spread through mass culling, surveillance, and monitoring of poultry and humans due to zoonotic nature of this disease. I told you about a zoonotic disease. That is a disease which can be spread from an animal to human beings. The consequent impact on tourism, especially back for the backwater boat operators in Kerala, they are. You must have seen. Some of you must have seen that backwater boating. It amounted to a loss of approximately $2,200 per boat due to fall in tourist in. Similarly, plant pathogens could also be used by agro-terrorists to devastate flora and agriculture. Diseases like kernel bunt, a fungal disease of wheat, can severely affect crop production. Another fungal disease, soybean rust, affects soybean crop, a significant source of protein for many regions. Rice is the most widely prevalent staple food of our planet. Rice blast, caused by again one fungus. This is considered the most sinister disease of rice crop. Plum pox virus can devastate the fruits of plums, peaches, and apricot. Now, biosecurity and response in agro-terrorism. Biosecurity is a management practice designed to prevent the occurrence or spread of an infectious disease. The animal farms are to be kept as oases so that there is minimal movement of pathogens across its borders. Biosecurity, it is the cheapest, most effective means of disease control. And the principles of biosecurity to be followed are as under. Allow only authorized persons inside a facility housing animals. Always remember, all biological forms have a potential to carry bioagents. Keep a record of all visitors and deliveries to the farm. In case of an event or outbreak, such records will be vital to pinpoint source of infection. The group of animals should be separated by a distance sufficient to prevent pathogen transmission. If new animals are introduced, they should be isolated on arrival and vaccinated to match the herd vaccination pattern. Utmost diligence should be used to procure feed for the animals. Only trusted and dependable sources are to be chosen. All non-essential traffic movement should be restricted on the farm. Installation of barriers to limit vehicular traffic should be considered, and there should be a provision for sanitization of goods and vehicles while entering the farm. All visitors should be provided with disposable gown, shoe covers, gloves and mask before coming into the contact with animals. And if an outbreak happens, it must be contained and eradicated as quickly as possible to lessen their impact on food cycle. Now, psychological aspects of biological disasters are also not less. It has been seen in patients recovering from biological disasters like SARS-CoV-1 and 2 that many of them showed the signs and symptoms of a chronic psychological impact. Not only patients, but the family members too are under a lot of psychological pressure. The fear of losing a loved one to an unknown disease is highly distressing. Caregivers and responders too are vulnerable to such reactions. Handling an outbreak with many people sick and diseased is not a pleasant experience. So, caregivers have a dual responsibility of taking care of their family and other patients. Sometimes, such psychological stress leads to chronic mental disorders, including depression and post traumatic stress disorders, necessitating chronic counseling and pharmacology. Now, quarantine and isolation. Several studies have been carried out to investigate the impact of quarantine and isolation on mental health. Quarantine can be accompanied by stress associated with the duration of the quarantine, fear of infection, frustration, boredom, inadequate supplies, and inadequate information. These stresses can induce acute stress disorders, anxiety, irritability, poor concentration, indecisiveness, deteriorating work performance, post traumatic stress symptoms, psychological distress, depressive symptoms, and insomnia. The prevalence of depression during COVID-19 quarantine ranged from about 16.5% up to 37%, and the prevalence of anxiety from 12.9% up to 35%. Other studies have shown that subjects who were in COVID-19 quarantine were more likely to experience adverse mental health effects in comparison to those who were not. Now we come to the end of the lecture on understanding the basics, importance, and impact of taking utmost biosecurity measures in the domain of public health. We understood how virulence of various bioagents could be different, but biosecurity measures have similar principles. The preventive strategies are not only highly cost effective, but highly efficient too. With this background in mind, let us discuss some case studies of biological attacks or disasters in our next lecture.